So thank you very much to everyone for joining, and particularly a big thank you to Danny and Matt for joining. The idea for this webinar came about when we were at BET in January, and we were on the BESA stand where we were talking about the challenges and the opportunities of businesses expanding internationally. And we kind of thought that there's lots of assumptions out there. There's lots of people with ideas of how to grow beyond borders, but they sometimes might need extra confidence or extra support. So we thought we would put this session together, breaking borders, expanding your EdTech businesses internationally. It's going to be a number of Q&As during the session today, but please do use the question and answer box to put comments in, and where we can, we'll feed them into the dialogue, because I think that's where people get a lot out of these sessions, is if we're also answering the questions which are applicable for you, or alternatively, we've left space at the end to be able to answer any kind of questions. So that's great. So we're seeing that from a government point of view in the UK, they're looking to grow the education exports, so technology as well as kind of other educational services, to 35 billion by 2030. So we're really keen to kind of play a part and to be able to support you to do that. So now we'll move on to the introductions. So Danny, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, I'm on there as Daniel Yao. I've not been called Daniel other than by my mother, so feel free to call me Danny. Yeah, and I'm founder and CEO of Global Education Strategy Team. We're a consultancy that helps education technology businesses expand internationally. Just I guess a little bit about me. I've worked in education technology for 17 years or so now, in a variety of different companies, and probably the last 10 years or so that has all been specifically working with international, in a variety of different companies of different shapes and sizes. And the consultancy was set up 5 years or so ago now, knowing that companies really struggled with moving internationally. So we're giving companies the opportunity to do that at the scale and pace that suits their needs.
And I'm very proud to have been one of your first customers, Danny.
Absolutely, yeah, Connor. Yeah, so Connor and I have worked together previously with Iris Education and at Juniper as well. So yeah, it's really good to be on here with you as well, Connor, for sure.
That's great. And Matt, if we can have an introduction for yourself.
Yep, hi everyone, lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'm Matt, I'm a former primary teacher turned EdTech founder, or teacherpreneur as they used to like to call us. So about 10 years ago, I saw a problem in the classroom that I was teaching in and developed a sort of solution to solve it, which went well. And then in line with lots of other teachers who go into EdTech, look to try and scale that to help other schools. And that has taken us particularly in the direction of international schools. What we do is help schools with their assessment frameworks, progress data, reporting to inspections, but also keeping parents in the loop, keeping them informed, basically with the goal of improving learning. And the platform that we developed is super flexible, very easy to use, and has been really embraced by international schools. So we sort of have focused on international education in the last few years, particularly. Outside of Learning Ladders, I'm also vice chair of BESA, the trade association, and I've been on the exec council there for 7 years. So sort of have a foot in sort of different camps. I'm very happy to chat about both.
Yeah. And you've also won a multitude of awards as well.
I mean, obviously far too modest to say, but anyone who knows me knows that I spent many, many years moaning about never actually winning a BET award, and now we finally won 3. So yes, we got highly commended this year for the main category that we're in, which is the assessment and planning one. So thank you for flagging that and not forcing me to crowbar it in.
No problem. So Andrews, if we can go on to the next slide. So and for me, for those that don't know me, I'm Connor Gately. I've worked in the EdTech space for far too many years now, which has been great. And I'm now working with Altamira, which is a software development house, the kind of development house in your pocket, where we very much are helping people craft products that their customers love, making sure you're getting the value out of what you're doing, but also allowing owners and founders to be in control of what they're doing. And that's why we want to put on these kind of forums to really kind of work with the best minds in the industry, but also to support people who are moving forward with their different plans. So in terms of, before we move into the questions, I think Andreas is going to put up a question for people. so that people
Yeah.
can answer as they do, and we'll get the feedback from that, and that will allow us to make sure that we're tailoring the session today to what it is that people need and what it is that people want. So we've got 4 subjects there, which is identifying the right markets and with the best growth potential, navigating regulatory, cultural, and operational challenges, choosing the right go-to-market strategy, and scaling resources and infrastructure effectively. So we'd like to know from your point of view, what do you see as the biggest challenge when expanding into international markets? So we'll give that a minute or 2 for people to answer.
Yeah, I can see the answers are coming in. A few more seconds and should be good.
Okay.
Yeah, let's give a few more seconds in case someone else decides to answer. We've got some nice insights. All right, let me then close it down and share the results.
Okay. All right. So I think in terms of our sweepstake that we did before, we were talking about this. Yeah, I think particularly that first one is really important. It is the right markets with the growth potential, and then followed by how we look at the scaling and the infrastructure effectively. So I think that's fair, and we'll bear that in mind as we're kind of responding back. And like we said, please do put any questions you've got in the Q&A box. So we could go on to the next slide so people can see the questions that we're going to be discussing. So I guess, Danny, you and I have spent many conversations when we've looked at different regions to target and to go after. So it'd be really good to get your insight and experience from when you're helping businesses in terms of how should businesses choose the right markets for expansion.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. So in terms of my suggestions, in terms of the way in which we work with clients and how we move them forward in terms of picking out the best market, is fundamentally you kind of got to look at your product and go, look, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? How is your product suited? Probably within your host country now. So if we, for example, if we said a UK-based company that's looking to move internationally, kind of what problem are you trying to solve? And then as a result, kind of work backwards from there in terms of what marketplace is best going to suit for that. Naturally, yeah, the product is going to be better suited in an area where it's not going to be fundamentally changed. So it might be based around language, it might be based around economics, it might be based around cost of sale, or being able to service that market based on time zones and all those sorts of things as well. So it's a kind of combination of different factors, I think, in terms of 1, where is the best product fit, 2, where economically they're going to be able to afford it, 3, where it's most likely to be attractive based on perhaps government legislations or the types of school, international school, independent schools that you're going to be looking at. So yeah, I think it's a combination of different factors, probably of those that I picked out, really. So kind of the economics, obviously you can pick out a number of stats that will show you where those numbers are growing in terms of the types of school and all those sorts of things as well. So I think looking at the data from both a strategic perspective and then a tactically going, where's the numbers, where's who's got the best economics for that as well.
And when you're supporting businesses that are looking at that, do they normally have a partner strategy, or do people look to go direct? What do you see is when people are trying to scale internationally? Because obviously feet on the ground is quite challenging.
Yeah, I think the simple answer is both. I think being able to sell direct obviously is no one's going to be able to sell your product as well as you are. So I think if you're able to do that yourselves, even better. With a partner, naturally, I think is a really good way to sell into certain regions where they've already got a customer base that they can sell into, for example, or a good network or an ability to host or service or kind of do the logistics for your company, depending upon the type of product that it is. So yeah, I think probably from my experience and the way in which we work with clients is to try and do a multi-channel approach. So both from an individual school to school groups to partners and affiliates and associates, all the way to hopefully a government level kind of opportunity potentially as well.
Yeah, but with product market fit being the key resonator.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the key really, because there's yeah, as much as it's exciting to kind of look at the world and go, there's a lot of opportunity in a lot of different places. It also means there's a lot of opportunity to put wasted resource, wasted money, wasted effort into regions where it's not going to work. So I think as important is trying to find out where it doesn't work and why it won't work in those regions, as opposed to necessarily looking at straight at where it will. So yeah, I think making sure that you're not spending time and resource in areas where it isn't a product fit. Yeah, for sure.
No, thank you. And Matt, from your point of view, I guess wearing your two hats in terms of Learning Ladders and BISA, in terms of what kind of experiences have you come across, which is, I guess, when you've seen either yourself looking at international markets or others from the communities that you support?
Taking the second one first, in terms of BISA, the trade association, what they offer, I think that's where you'll find a lot of really good information. So BISA is very, very good at working with the Department of Education, Department of International Trade, all the local consulates. Everybody around the world has been doing it for a number of years. So that's a really good shortcut to having a conversation with people who know the global market. You can go to an event, they run conferences, you can pick up the phone, become, if you're a small company, become a Launchpad member. Is very inexpensive and get access to that kind of information. So you get the raw data in terms of reports, but you then get the really important context around that and a bit of guidance and a bit of expertise. But also, one thing I'll constantly bang on about today is the importance of the EdTech community. In my experience, the vast majority of people who go into EdTech go into it because they want to make education better for children. We're all achieving the same goal. We can be competitors in small niches at some times, but ultimately everybody wants the same thing. And I think what you find is the more you ask questions, the more you're collaborating with people, the more collegiate you are with other EdTech companies, the more information you'll find about different markets. So completely agree with everything Danny said. I do think reaching out to people like BISA is super useful because they've got the experience, but also they can facilitate the introductions and conversations. I get lots of people who are connected to me through BISA because they've had a conversation with someone about BISA. They want to find out something about a particular market, or they want to kick about some particular ideas. And I'm very happy to share some time giving whatever information I might be able to. And I know there's lots of people who will do that. So that would definitely be a route, I would say, for one thing. Our experience with Learning Ladders, I would love to say that we sat in a dark room and came up with a strategy, executed it, and it worked perfectly. And that is how Learning Ladders has arrived at having international schools. It's very much not the case. So we went at it from we don't have funding, tons of funding. It's my business. I set it up with my personal life savings. So we were doing everything on a shoestring, quite guerrilla, very, very limited. And things that kind of work for us, which I'd flag maybe, are possibly some of the really obvious stuff. We would put a lot of free content out there in terms of thought leadership webinars, and just look at where it resonated. Where are we getting traffic from? And you'd find some unusual markets you're getting some interesting traffic from, and then be curious about why that is. And ask people, have some conversations, put it out on social media. We think we've got this great product. Does it resonate? So our first international schools were in the Middle East, along with a lot of other people. Lots of international schools there, lots of British curriculum schools over there. And we were curious. I jumped on a plane. We had a conversation. There seemed to be a connection, and I jumped on a plane, parked myself in a hotel for a few days, invited a few schools to come and have a coffee and just chat through and understand what their problems were. Through that, we then identified what Danny was talking about in terms of a product market fit, but we identified a problem that we hadn't currently solved, that nobody else had currently solved, that was a massive problem in the local area, that was very easy for us to solve, but very difficult for our competitors to solve. And we were then able to spend a few months dev time and come back to the market and say, we had a really great trip a few months ago. We listened to what you said. We built this slight enhancement specifically for your needs. We'd really love you to try it and see what you think. And then we kind of grew that way. So that's how we went about it.
Yeah, no, that's certainly a real success story. And I know that when you mentioned BISA, I was very lucky to have been invited on a couple of the different trade events that they've gone on, because for those who don't know, BISA put an awful lot of time in terms of understanding the international markets. And the one that I'm referring to is Vietnam, where we ended up doing a presentation, talks. We met with a lot of people. These were kind of ministry level conversations and contacts. And if you're involved with BSET, that can really help power charge a business. The fact that they are understanding the challenges of the local educational environments, and then they are putting businesses in front of those problems where they believe there's a fit, or as you've mentioned, Matt, companies will take that information and then come back. And it is really fantastic, particularly when you look at international, where quite often, as Danny mentioned, you've got more of an aggregate decision, because one conversation that BISA could open could really be the footprint that a business needs to expand and gain the right investment to be able to capitalize from that point of view. So yeah, no, there's some really good kind of takeaways there from that point of view. And Andrew, so we just go on to the next question there. And I guess I might come to you, Matt, first on this one, based on what you just said at the end there. So I see a lot of businesses when we're talking to them that want to expand internationally, and then quite often want to kind of try and change everything and that side of things. And I get the point from what you've just mentioned there in terms of your product has to be able to hit the need, but if you can find those niches, that's where you should double down on to kind of get that growth. So what is your advice for businesses when they look internationally and they're forever hearing going, there's the language localization, currency is different, decimal places are different, curriculum's different, etc. It can be a myriad of challenges when people are kind of going, well, we fit this market, but now we've got to change everything and people will still love us exactly the same way. And that's where I see a lot of people falling down and trying to do too much for too many.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it depends on your particular skill set as whoever this person is. If you're a founder with an education background, you're obviously in a much better position to go out and have the education-led conversation. So from the Learning Ladder's point of view, everybody we employ has been a teacher. That's quite important to us, apart from the dev team. And I'm a former teacher, so I'm a big believer in physically going out there and getting in the mud with people and understanding what their problems are, because you can then discover things that they just won't tell you because they don't realize there's an opportunity to solve it. So we do that. Last few months ago, I was over in the UAE. It's a big market for us. I spent a week out there, no sales whatsoever, was not on the radar, just existing customers. We saw about 30 existing schools and just spent some time in each of them, just really trying to understand, what takes your time, what's your frustration, both in terms of Learning Ladders, but generally in school life. So really getting stuck into the detail, because that can quite often be something that is very difficult to identify in a report or talking to somebody, even asking schools. A lot of the time they think they have the solution, but you might be able to come up with an alternative which is better. If you don't have that expertise in-house, then use somebody else or ask somebody is obviously a good thing to do. And yeah, the practical side of things are always there. For me, they tend to be secondary. They're things that you can solve, your dev team can solve. You need to know what they are. There's a finance thing, there's a practical thing. But I think if you can put yourself in the shoes, to use the sort of quote, if you can put yourselves in the shoes of a teacher in the market or whoever your target market is that you're trying to get into, talk their language, understand their pain points, what goes on, that's super important. To give you an example, when we first started going to the UAE, we realized it was really important to do CPD for teachers because a lot of them had different kind of training. They weren't familiar with what we did. And it took us a little while before we realized that we weren't getting as many signups for our after-school CPD events as we hoped from this subsection of the teaching community, because the way it worked for a number of the schools is they got a school-mandated bus home after school. So they had to leave the building by a particular time. Otherwise, they missed their bus home. Completely different to how we would do it in the UK. That meant we weren't getting signups for our CPD. So we were stressing in the UK, thinking our messaging is wrong, it's the wrong content, it's this, it's that, it's the other. They were far too polite to tell us. And the simple reason was they didn't want to miss the bus home. You wouldn't know that unless you were actually physically there watching all these buses leaving the school. So I do think that's a big win.
So it's the real need to understand what's needed on the ground where you're looking to work with.
Yeah, I think so personally. That's still what we tend to try and do, is finding those. We talk incessantly internally about what are those sort of 5% differences that we can make. In our space, there are a number of challenger platforms that are aspiring to be as good as we are. And the reason why we like to think we're still ahead is because we're always looking for those small things. It's never going to be a big thing. It's always going to be a small thing that makes a difference.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Danny, I guess with your kind of business, I guess this is very much in your wheelhouse in terms of you very much understand what's going on in the ground in different markets, whether it's a partner-led, school-led, or whether they need to change the products. So what kind of tough conversations have you had with, with clients when they're looking to expand in different areas, and how do you focus them on what's going to deliver results?
Sure. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to know, obviously, of the people that we've got here on the different types of EdTech businesses that we've got on, because obviously somebody like Matt who has a business that is largely around a kind of an educational system, where you'd have other products that are probably a little bit more agnostic, based around obviously kind of operational and things like that. So yeah, I'll talk as broadly as I can. I think there's always going to be an opportunity. I mean, one of the reasons that we tend to start our clients with international schools is that it allows you to work in a big and growing market with international schools, but you can find a niche within those international schools that allows you to, perhaps localize the product, as opposed to having to fully kind of rewrite the product and things like that to its nth degree, really. So, for example, if you're looking at, if you're a UK company and working with British international schools, a lot of the customizations and things like that are going to be just that kind of localizing the product, rather than having to completely rewrite it, into an Arabic or into a Chinese or into a completely different, curriculum that, you may not have worked in before. So, international schools market is really, really good from that perspective. That's a growing market. It's growing from kind of 8,000 international schools 5 years ago to 16,000 international schools by the end of this year. So that's a really big growing market, and it allows you to work with a subset of schools within that. So whether it's a British international school, whether it's a US international school, or different types of curricula, that means that you can kind of work with a sweet spot within your regions that you're looking to expand into. And then it also provides a reference point for you to be able to expand to kind of the public schools within those regions as well, or the independent schools within those regions, and not just a kind of a straight international school as well. I think, finding the cultural fit is really, really good, as Matt said. So, they won't tell you necessarily those sorts of things unless you know a bit about them. So finding the kind of right regions that are going to suit your type of product, or they're looking for it. But similarly, we've worked with a company that their perfect opportunity was in Qatar. However, they couldn't really localize the product from both a language or a time perspective to be able to actually fulfill that. So I think in the first instance, it's probably working out, is the squeeze worth the juice? So is it worth rewriting our product completely for the size of this market, or can we work around a smaller subset to be able to kind of move into those markets and kind of reduce the amount of development that's needed in the short term as well?
Yeah, no, and I guess when you're looking at this, we've got companies that'll be coming from America or from the UK, and then looking at the broader international market. But then you've also got the incumbents, which are companies that have started off in these kind of other countries and that side of things. How do you see those kind of relationships kind of working in those, in those countries where you've got a local organization which is developing their product, but then also international organizations coming in? I guess there must be a fine balance sometimes, because obviously we all champion the British education providers, etc.
Sure. I think that's, again, kind of why the international schools market is a really, really good one, in that, they like the familiarity of working with, a British product and a British company and all those sorts of things, understanding that, British education still, has a really, really big weight within kind of education worldwide as well. So the British education suppliers, as a result, have a really, really good reputation within that. And I think this also comes down to, again, the cultural fit of, where your product is going to fit best. Is your product that might be worth tens of thousands of pounds going to equate to what they can necessarily provide based on cheap labor that they're able to provide within those regions as well, for example. So they might be able to provide a team of engineers for less than, you know, what your product cost is. So it's about, I think, yeah, trying to find the sweet spot of customer type, all those sorts of things, versus obviously the cultural demands of, you know, where it's going to fit and things like that too.
No, okay, no, that's good. That's good. And Andrew, so we can go on to the next question, please. So I guess I don't mind who wants to go first in terms of answering this one, but what do you see as the key challenges and opportunities for international growth at the moment? And then which businesses are leading the way and why?
Who's going, Matt?
Who wants to go first?
Are you happy for you to go, Danny, or I can jump in? Up to you.
Yeah, key challenges, I think, obviously, yeah. There's a kind of some of the things I think, well, yeah, if we talk about it from a company perspective, I think naturally everybody wants to try and do international, but they're not necessarily sure where and how. And it seems to be all in or all out, I think, a little bit as well. So naturally people want to expand internationally, but without having to reinvent the wheel and, you know, do it naturally and at a scale and pace that suits them a little bit, really. I think some of the things that you've mentioned earlier about working with BISA, I completely agree with, because being able to, yeah, nothing will beat being out in the region and understanding and helping yourself understand what localization means. So yeah, kind of how Matt talked about, you wouldn't know that about people getting the bus home unless you were there or they told you, and those sorts of things. So I think working with BISA, doing the trade missions and things like that, allow you to do it in a very cost-effective way too. I'm not associated with BISA in any way, so yeah, this is a completely unbiased just thought process on that. So yeah, it allows you to kind of get out to a Vietnam or get out to the Middle East, or I've also done one in Latin America. So it allows you to, yeah, to kind of get there without you necessarily having to do the whole thing yourself. So the other option is obviously you fund yourself, you get your stand at your exhibition and all those sorts of things, which means you put yourself into, you know, I guess, you know, a big spend before you've even started. So I think working with those sorts of organizations in terms of, yeah, scaling your costs, I think is really, really useful. Yeah, I think localization is always going to be a key one. Delivery in those regions is key. And yeah, I think people like to feel like they're being looked after locally as well. So whilst internationally expanding is, you know, is great from the UK, there comes a tipping point, I think, where people want to be seen to be looked after locally in that sense as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair. And Matt, from your point of view, what do you see as the key challenges and opportunities?
Probably take a step back before answering that, and just I'm possibly slightly contrarian, not massively commercial on this one, but we come at it, or I always come at it from a perspective of we want the school to win. We want the children to have the best possible outcomes. We want the school to succeed. We believe ours is the best product for most schools, but it won't always be the best product for every single school. So we come at it very much from a perspective of we want to understand the challenge as deeply as we possibly can, and then we want to explain and articulate our version of the solution. And most of the time, we believe we're the best product and we will therefore win. So it's about maximizing the number of conversations that you can have so that your business grows, obviously, and learning from the times where you don't win and understanding what somebody else is doing better. And that's okay, because there will always be somebody better in some circumstances, and you want to learn from that and how do you adapt. You can't be all things to all people. The thing I find in terms of this particular question is you got to take a long, hard look at why are you going for international growth? And something I see sometimes is hand on heart. Are you going for international growth because you've completely saturated your home market? Is it not working for you in your home market? A product that's not doing well in one market won't necessarily do well if you suddenly then export it to another country. So are you fundamentally solving problems for schools, and do you believe that can be translated to other markets? You may well find that you've gone to the wrong market to start with. You know, it may well be that your product solves the problem for schools internationally in a better way than it does domestically. That's fine. I think the businesses that are leading the way are very, very clear about the problem they're solving for schools, and that is
has commonality across lots of different geographies. So, I mean, name checking a couple that I would think of off the top of my head. If you look at businesses like sort of Times Table, Rockstars, White Rose, Maths, they have a very simple proposition, which is solving a particular problem for particular schools, and that translates in lots of different areas for them. If you look at other big companies, Twinkle, you know, with the greatest respect, it's banners and bunting, but that's what people need, and they need it everywhere, and it works extremely well. They do that extremely well, and now they've expanded into lots of other areas. What is the problem that you're solving? So too often you sort of see companies possibly driven by, you know, the need to grow, the VC pressure of, I've got to get an extra 25% growth this year. Crikey, where can I go? There's lots of schools in this place. Let's go there, and I'll try and grow my bottom line. That's not necessarily going to yield success in, I would suggest, in all cases. So yeah, long answer, but there you go.
No,
I think that's very fair, and I think it very much is that kind of you've got to know the problem that you're solving, because otherwise international markets will just become a graveyard, because people will very quickly ghost you, very quickly go, you won't build up the advocacy, etc., which is always been very important in the education market, but particularly when you're selling internationally, you need to be able to have that kind of advocacy to go, we are solving these pain points on the ground, and you've got to have spent time there to make sure you understand, so that people see you as a part of the solution of what they're trying to achieve.
And I think honesty goes a long way. It's a very networked market. I'm talking about independent international schools, but generally speaking, that kind of area, you know, honesty is massively respected and remembered. You know, saying to somebody, you know, we have customers today who we spoke to years ago and had an honest conversation that it wasn't a good fit. And that has been brilliant for us in the long run, pretty painful at the time, but, you know, you have that conversation. Likewise, you know, we sign up customers all the time where they've moved school, and they go to a new school that has a different solution, and they want to bring learning ladders into it and stuff. So it's horses for courses. Danny mentioned, I mean, I'm talking very specifically about our particular area, which is a niche within the niche, if you like. And if you're selling physical products, if you're selling different kind of products, it's very, very different. If you've got a freemium model, it's very, very different to what we're doing, which requires buy-in from pretty much the whole school. But I think the principles, you know, in many ways are still the same.
Yeah, no, thank you. So moving on to the next question, I'm conscious of our time. So in terms of what support do businesses need to support their international growth ambitions? So Danny, when you're going into businesses that want to expand internationally, taking on board the points we've mentioned here, the problems that they're solving, making sure they understand what's needed on the ground, what kind of support do you see these businesses needing to be effective?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll start by kind of highlighting that point that Matt just made as well, really, that this isn't, international growth is not a quick win. It's not a very simple way of just adding 25% onto your kind of turnover and all those sorts of things. So with that, it's hugely network driven. There's a lot of international school groups. So in the same way that UK Maths have kind of grown together, independent school groups are, continue to grow as well. The affiliates and the associations are, really important. So being members of like BSER, but similarly others such as the Council of British International Schools, Fabersia, national schools in Spain, and there's a variety of them around the world. And I think, that network is really important. So localization and understanding the market is really important, really. I think, everybody knows that I think when they're moving internationally, they can't just necessarily pick up what they've done in their host country, drop it into a new country, and then just away you go. So I think really understanding the market. I think, understanding the market from a product perspective, understanding what size and shape your product needs to be to kind of fit that. Also from a sales and marketing perspective of understanding the messaging and the routes into those schools. So I think just sending out blanket emails is by itself might get you one or two bits in return, but I think in terms of really kind of getting into a market and making it a sustainable piece of growth, you probably need an expert in those regions, whether that be direct, a consultant, or through a partner. I think, yeah, you probably really need to have somebody that understands the market, or give yourself enough time to be able to understand that market yourself properly.
Yeah.
And really upskill yourself in terms of the knowledge that you need for those markets.
Yeah. No, and Matt, from your point of view, in terms of this, if we can add a different flavour onto this, how important are lighthouse accounts in terms of this? Because you mentioned how when you started your business, you arranged a couple of appointments, you went out, you saw a niche, you then came back, and then you had to kind of, still get in there. So how important is that ability to get those kind of early lighthouse accounts? Because you don't just want to go, oh, we've done this in the UK, we've done this in the UK. People want to know they've done it nearby.
Yeah, you've got to be authentic. There's no point in selling a UK product in somewhere else, because that's not of interest to them, is it? So yeah, we still have them. We still have a number of schools that have never paid for the license, and they give us loads and loads of feedback. We push our product ideas through them. We get them to live test new stuff for us, and that's great. That's far more value than a subscription would give us. So I think it's super important. I think if you can get them, obviously, if you can get marquee schools that people will recognize the name, that's obviously great. But be realistic, pretty much everybody approaches those schools. They can almost get everything for free. Really, what you want is somebody who's engaged in your particular niche, who's a real expert in your niche, who will give you sort of detailed and really meaningful feedback, and not just necessarily a logo you can put on your website. A bit of both obviously can be great if you can do it, but yeah, lighthouse schools, I would say, never underestimate the value of somebody who's in it, who really knows what they're talking about, giving you honest feedback. That's so important.
Yeah, because I know that in terms of a number of markets, you can sometimes have that emperor's clothes effect, where everyone's going, yeah, this is going to be great, this is going to be amazing, this is really working. So I guess you really need those kind of trusted advisors like a Danny or Matt yourself through BISA, etc., to be able to turn around to people to go, come on, you started off with the wrong assumptions here. You need to really go and revalidate, relook at your base, relook at your software, etc., to be clear on what is the need that you're fixing. And to your point, making sure that you're not just chasing growth because someone's telling you need growth. You need to be solving a problem.
Yeah, I mean, we have probably, I won't name them obviously, but of all our customers, all the teachers, all the senior leaders and everything who use the product, I'd be fairly confident that there are probably 5 or 10 individuals that everybody in my company can name, because they are constantly on desk, they're constantly on email, asking for new features, asking for tweaks, asking for this. And they probably account for, a serious proportion of our time, of our support and everything else, but they are the most valuable of customers that all we can have, because they're the ones that are pushing. And we know that if we can keep them happy, then chances are we're keeping everybody else happy, because they're incredibly vocal. So yeah, your most vocal customers, people who are pushing you to do new things, I think are by far the most valuable personally.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing I've seen in the education sector for a long while, is there are so many passionate people that just want to make sure that the outcomes are being delivered for the pupils. And if you're not listening to that, then you're being a fool, because it is so rich, that kind of feedback that you get.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that question you've got on the board for me is patience. I think one of the things, again, we tipped up to the first guest show, had a load of interest on the stand, had the minister come over, had all sorts of stuff. We're back on the plane with stacks of business cards and leads. We thought, brilliant, we cracked it. Chased them all up, probably got 2 sales out of it or something like that. It takes a long time. So, just thinking that you can book into a couple of shows and stuff, if you're going to engage someone like Danny, I would say give him time, would be my advice.
Yeah.
It's not going to suddenly do it in a month. But maybe he
Yeah.
can. If he can, then that's fantastic. But
yeah, well, I went to set up a software business over in Ireland before the credit crunch, and I remember going. It was outside education. It was in the health sector, and I remember going in with meeting a CIO of one of the large health trusts, and as it came to the end of the meeting, he shook my hand and said, "It's really nice to meet with you. Now come back to me in 18 months." And I went, "I'm sorry." He went, "Well, at least then I know you're serious about operating in this market if you've carried on that long."
Yeah.
I was like, good. And I have seen that in international markets. People kind of go, "It's great. You come in with a blaze of glory. Are you still going to be able to keep your point about patience resonated with me there?" So So no, it's good. And he did sign a good contract with me about 18 months later on. So it was worth it. It was worth
worth hanging in there.
It was worth the patience. Okay, so our final question before we go into the Q&A, which is we didn't want to make this conversation about AI. We think that's kind of being talked about a hell of a lot everywhere at the moment. So just in terms of more of a kind of a high level on the jovial side of things, in terms of, what opportunities do you see for businesses looking at international expansion, besides AI? So when you're looking at all of the different markets you're looking at, where do you see the opportunities that people should be starting to focus to kind of go, actually, this could make a real difference? These are the challenges that people want to address.
Yeah. I mean, just from my perspective, I'm a big advocate for, independent international schools around the world. We work with a company, ISC Research, who, just a partner of ours to kind of get our data from. They will tell you that, that market just continues to grow and is continuing to grow as well. So, that, I suppose it's the kind of growing middle class of people around the world, essentially, where, that number continues to grow. There's 300-400 brand new international schools opening every year. So that international market, really is growing. In terms of some of the regions and sorts of things where a lot of our clients are seeing success, everybody kind of wants to go to the Middle East. Dubai is really, really popular because, I mean, the UAE is only 50 years old. So as a result, a lot of people are looking at their first or second generation of software there, whatever your type of software is. So it might be the first time they bought something or the second time they bought something necessarily, compared to Europe, for example, where you've got schools that are hundreds of years old. And you might be replacing something for the fourth or fifth time, for example, so they're a little bit more kind of savvy about what they want and things like that. UK products are still very well regarded in a number of different regions, especially Asia. The thoughts of making sure that all their students speak English very well, they understand the British curriculums and all those sorts of things is still very well regarded. But there's in terms of emerging markets and things like that, some of the markets I think that typically you'd have steered away from because some of the problems that they've had previously from an EdTech perspective, they have access to cheap labor, and all that, and their fees aren't particularly high and all those sorts of things. There are big growth in places like India, across Latin America, whereas typically you'd have steered away from them because of the cost of acquisition, as well as obviously their access to cheap labor. So I think there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on in international for sure. I think you have to stick at it. It's not going to be a quick win, as we've said throughout this, but there is definitely great opportunity if you can get your product to fit right and see it through.
No, that's great. That's great. And Matt, from your point of view?
I think there's a few teacher CPD, particularly. I think a lot of teachers are coming in less well trained than I was a teacher in particular areas. So ongoing CPD as part of the platform is something that we now do, which is not part of our core offering, but it enables them to use our product better. So that's quite important. I think integrating, increasingly schools don't silo their EdTech products. They want them as part of an ecosystem. That makes sense. Doesn't necessarily need to be one big MIS provider. It can be lots of specialists, as long as they sort of connect together and have thought about that journey and how that works for people. And then I think the other big thing in international schools, I would say, is flexibility and the ability to bespoke your software. So if you look at international schools in the last few years, historically, they will obviously have tended to anchor themselves around one particular curricula. 2/3 of international schools opening up in the last 5 years follow hybrid curriculums where they cherry pick different bits or they do multiple curricular streams. So the ability to adapt to that environment are the kind of things that we're looking at, plus a couple of other I won't mention, but you'll see them on the website soon.
Well, no, yeah. So certainly, when Danny, you mentioned about India, you're certainly seeing that kind of dual path is becoming quite key for a lot of people. They want to be able to enable their students to keep their opportunities open in terms of where they might want to study in future years. So I think linking all of those side of things together and everyone understanding those frameworks is really, really important. So no, thank you very much. And conscious of our time, so Andrews, is it worth us going to the Q&A and seeing what
Sure.
kind of questions you've had come through?
Yeah. Let me have a quick look what we've got. Right. Okay, so the first one is, what is the best approach to attract investors to support international growth?
Shall I pick this one up? I think it's funny enough, I've just been sent through a deck by somebody who wants me to look at it. So apologies if that person is on the call. It's got to be credible. It's fantastical numbers are obviously the sort of killer. VCs will see tons and tons of these decks, and they're almost looking for a reason to chuck it on the floor rather than necessarily follow it through. The first person looking at it will typically be the most junior person in the business who's got a tick list to go through. So it needs to be super simple, very clear, and realistic. Obviously, there's been a bit of a joke in EdTech for the last few years that you need to put AI in it somewhere. So that possibly remains the case. We haven't ever taken investment. We've thought about it. We get approached about it, and we've had conversations about it. We just haven't ever done it. So I can only answer limited. Think about what happens after they've got the money. It's not just about the money. Think about what happens when they're part of your company. How does that affect your DNA as a company? So, if you have a large amount of your shareholding that is run by a VC company that's on a deal cycle that needs to flip your deal every certain number of years, they're going to want to see a certain amount of growth. You're under an enormous pressure to achieve that, which can be a good thing. It can be a good sort of nudge, but it can also take the company in directions that possibly won't be. I've seen some really, really good people really struggle when taking on big VC investments in education because they've had that extra pressure. So be mindful of the whole journey, not just the check. It's not about just getting the check, it's about what happens afterwards.
Yeah, no, and from my point of view, I think being able to articulate a double bottom line, so you're not just talking about your financial KPIs, you're also linking it to the outcomes that you're trying to deliver. Because I think that way, investors really see your core purpose, but they really understand, they really see that you understand how your business is going to grow. Because amazingly, how surprised people get when you ask, well, where does 80% of your profit come from? And where do you spend as a business 80% of your time? Quite often people can't answer those questions, or they can't say, I picked up this customer on day one, and this is where they are 3 years later, to be able to show the kind of the growth with those clients, but also to show that they're replicating those journeys so that you're able to identify when a customer comes to us in this way, we can now predict where they're going to be in 3 years with us. I think it's really important that you have those kind of fundamentals. And I think it's really important that you've gone back to the start where you understand your marketplace, but then you understand why they're going to continue to choose you at every step of the way.
Yeah, great. So another question we've got is on AI, so we won't be able to escape it. Do you see AI as essential to your growth strategy?
Yes, this is probably for me as well. I don't see it as essential, but I think it's a very useful tool in the right context. So, in our particular niche, when you're looking at school data, AI can be really fantastic, but there's a number of steps that have yet to be adequately resolved before you can see genuine benefits of AI in a lot of circumstances. So, for example, when you're looking at school assessment data, AI only really comes into its own when you have genuinely good, solid, raw data over a number of years that you can do something with. Most schools' challenge with school data is actually just getting teachers to put it into the system in the first place. AI won't solve that problem necessarily. Once you've got it in the system, can it do useful things with it? Absolutely. That's really good. Would you use AI to do more generative work? From our point of view, it's something that we're looking at. I'm not sure that it's necessarily consistently strong enough without what they charmingly call hallucinations, which is essentially bullshitting.
Yes.
I think at the stage that we're at now, obviously there's a lot of bubble around AI. AI is essentially, it's enormous institutionalized theft and then mansplaining on steroids. So in education, there's a bit of a problem there with some of what comes out of it. So yes, long term, in our particular niche, still a few areas that need to be solved first.
Yeah.
Some of the
Danny, have you got a view on that?
Yeah, some of the, I think it's a little bit, if you took a backward step, when kind of schools started first using the internet, it was kind of a bit like, well, students have got access to, billions of different things now, and they can do it all by themselves. But how do we kind of narrow it down to make it safe and all those sorts of things for them? So it's kind of, obviously, however many years later, it's kind of very much the same sorts of thing with AI, in that schools are now going, it's great that they've got access to so much information, but how do we actually make it safe? How do we make it worthwhile? How do we make it useful and functional, basically? So I think a lot of the school groups that we're talking to, are kind of looking at various different policies and about making it safe, making it worthwhile. Because I think it's very capable, but I think kind of putting kind of a framework around it so that schools are using it and knowing what they're using it for, it is very different at this point.
Yeah, no, and I think when I spoke with Mark Anderson at BET earlier in the year, he made the point that he said, and I think it comes back to what you're talking about, the CPD and people still needing that. He goes, a junior teacher using AI is probably going to get some results, whereas a more experienced teacher using AI and using their experience with it is probably going to get more transformational results. And I think that's the really important thing that we have to remember, is that it's it is a tool. It is a tool, and the more experience that you have in where you see your expertise, the better you're going to be able to apply those tools to get the outcomes for your pupils. So I think it's kind of the conversation isn't just about AI. It's very much in terms of, are people using it effectively to really support the domain that they're in?
Yeah, true. Okay, great. So I think we've got one more question. I think that's all we've got. Yeah. So how important are partners for international growth, or can you be as successful going on your own?
That's for you, Danny.
No, I think you can definitely do it without partners. Obviously, it depends on the type of product that you're selling and all those sorts of things. So I'll make some assumptions here. But I would always encourage businesses to sell themselves internationally and not just through a partner. I think there's a number of good partners, a number of bad partners, and I think sometimes you don't necessarily know until, I guess you have to kiss a few frogs to kind of work out if they're a good partner or not sometimes for you. It's about finding the right type of partner. Are they good at selling your type of product, or are they just doing something for the highest margin, or are they looking at your product alongside 5 different others as just an option? So I think it is important to sell very much by yourself as well. So the routes into the market, you understand the nuances, you understand the cultural appropriation and all those sorts of things, and don't just hand it over to a partner who will never be able to sell it as well as you can your own business. So I think with that, I'd be wary about partners in terms of finding the right ones. I think they are very, very valuable. Obviously, dependent upon the type of business, might also be necessary. But also, if you have the ability to sell yourself, definitely do so.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you're able to sell yourself and that you understand what's going on the ground, and that you're able to go direct. And as an example from one of again, when I mentioned about working in Ireland, a partner we had was telling me that there were a number of accounts that were off list that I couldn't speak to because they were theirs. I ended up winning business in their largest account, and they got livid with me and came and said, right, we want our X percentage point margin. But it got me a lot of respect. I gave them, in parlance, I gave them a bloody nose to go, look, the product does work. We can sell it in this market. And all of a sudden, because I'd sold it into their flagship account, then all of their account managers were going, can you train us? Can you tell us how this is going to work? So I think you need to be able to do both. And it's really important when you're following a partner strategy that it's not one dimensional. And you'll always hear me talking about, you've got to look at how you're selling with, how you're selling through, and how you're selling to. And then you've got to have different expectations of partners depending on that. Because too many people, when they go into what I've seen in international markets, and I'd be interested in both of your take, the partner might want top margin straight away without committing to what they're going to do on your behalf. And quite often people go, yeah, that's great. And then all of a sudden, it's a marry in haste, repent at leisure. You've really got to be clear on your expectations of partners, and you've got to be able to work alongside them as well, because you've got to have a foothold in where you're trying to sell.
Yeah. I think often people look at partners and going, it's a simpler way, that I don't necessarily need to understand the market in quite the same way. They have the market understanding, they have access to the schools or whoever it happens to be. But I think at the same time, it's also a longer process for the partner as well to get themselves used to a brand new product to sell into their kind of accounts and all those sorts of things as well. So it can actually extend the process a little bit longer too. So for example, if you were to find a new partner, by the time you've upskilled them, by the time they've taken it out to market, by the time they've come back with questions, all those sorts of things, it's not necessarily a quicker process. So yeah, I think, for example, in year one, if you were to look at a client of ours and go, what would you expect through partner sales over the first 6 months, first 9 months, first 12 months? It's very much going to be back end weighted to 9 months, 12 months to expect them to see some real return, and it more likely to be within year two. So yeah, I'd just kind of be wary about looking at that as a quick win as well. Is not necessarily the case.
Okay, Matt, do you have any views before we wrap up?
Very quickly, I mean, obviously it's horses for courses. If you're talking about partners in terms of resellers, it can theoretically be quite attractive, but you're just going to be one of a number of products they have to sell, in terms of the actual physical rep, and what's their knowledge going to be? Are they going to represent you in the detail you need? Is it possible, realistic for them to do that? For us, it doesn't work. We've tried it, didn't work. Is it useful to have a partner who can hold your hand in the market when you first start? Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you're trying to learn a sport, you need a coach, you go to the gym, you get a PT or something, you want someone to help you, and then you might not need them forever, but it's a really good way of doing it. So I think local market expertise and knowledge is definitely super valuable. A reseller type partner very much depends on what you do.
No, I'd agree. Well, I'm conscious we're pretty much at the top of the hour, so I just wanted to say a big thank you to Danny and Matt for all of your contributions today, and also a big thank you to everyone who's attended the webinar today. And I guess my quick takeaways are that an international strategy, it's not a quick win. It's very much you as a business have got to have patience with what you're trying to do, but you've also got to understand the problem that you're solving. You can't look at international growth as just we need growth, so therefore we're going to go internationally. You've really got to understand why you're doing what you're doing, the outcomes that you're solving. And then when you are looking at this journey, there is a community out there of people that want to help. We've mentioned the likes of BISA, etc. There's other providers, there's other people. There are people that want to help you to be successful. So from our point of view, I think it's very clear, focus on your core, be patient, reach out for help, whether that be from the likes of Altamira, BISA, Matt, Danny. There are people out there which are going to help you cover those hard yards. So thank you very much, and we wish everyone all the best success.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.